The great station Nexus Prime floated in the dark space between star systems like a massive crystal flower. Its transparent walls caught the light from distant suns and threw it back in rainbow colors. Inside the main chamber, 12 different alien species sat in their special seats, each one designed for their unique bodies. Commander Elena Vasquez walked into the chamber with steady steps. Behind her came 3 other humans from Earth Space Command. Their simple gray uniforms looked plain next to the amazing forms of the alien council members. Elena kept her face calm, but her heart beat fast. This was the most important day in human history. The Vectar beings looked like living crystals shaped into tall, sharp forms. Their bodies caught the light and threw it around the room in geometric patterns. When they moved, they made soft chiming sounds like musical instruments. The Vectar Prime speaker was the largest of them all, standing 3 meters tall with edges that seemed to cut through the air itself. On the other side of the chamber, the luminary danced as pure light. They had no solid bodies at all, just glowing energy that shifted between colors. Sometimes they looked like flames, sometimes like flowing water made of stars. When they spoke, their voices came from everywhere at once, like music played on instruments made of sunshine. The ancient Thekanari sat in the center, their massive forms covered in what looked like living metal. Their faces were hidden behind masks that changed shape constantly. They were the oldest species in the galaxy, and everyone said their minds could think thoughts that lasted for hundreds of years. Elena stopped in the middle of the chamber. The silence stretched out like a rope being pulled tight. Finally, the Vectar Prime speaker's form shifted, and sound came from somewhere inside its crystal body. "So," it said, its voice like wind chimes in a storm, "the humans have come to ask for a seat at our table." Elena nodded. "We have. Earth has been traveling in space for 200 years now. We've built colonies on 12 worlds and made peaceful contact with 6 species. We think we're ready to join the Galactic Council." A sound filled the chamber that Elena had never heard before. It wasn't exactly laughter, but something that made her feel like she was being laughed at by creatures whose jokes she couldn't understand. The sound came from inside her mind, pressing against her thoughts like cold fingers. The luminary beings grew brighter, their light pulsing in patterns that hurt to look at. One of them spoke, its voice like singing crystal. 200 years? "Oh, little flesh creatures, we have been traveling between stars for longer than your entire species has existed." "Indeed," said the Thekanari elder, its voice deep and slow like the sound of mountains breaking. "Your people still use fusion rockets to push through space like swimming through thick mud. You know nothing of dimensional travel." A holographic display appeared in the air above Elena's head. It showed human spaceships, blocky metal things with bright flames shooting from their backs. Next to them appeared the ships of the council species. The alien vessels were impossible shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves, moving through space by stepping through holes in reality itself. "Your weapons," said another Vectar, "are crude chemical explosives and simple energy beams. They could not even scratch the paint on our ships." More holograms appeared. Human weapons fired bullets and laser beams. Alien weapons opened tears in space itself, or turned entire areas of reality inside out. The difference was like comparing a stick to lightning. "Your minds," added a creature that looked like a cloud of silver liquid, "are trapped in linear time. You think one thought, then another, then another. We think in dimensions your language has no words for." Elena felt her face grow hot. These beings were not just rejecting humanity. They were making fun of them like adults laughing at children playing dress-up. But she kept her voice steady. "We may be young," she said, "but we learn fast. Humans have always been good at finding new ways to solve problems." The Prime Speaker's crystal form shifted again, and now Elena could see what might have been amusement in its geometric features. "Problems? Child, you do not even understand what the real problems are. You play with toys and call it science." "Your people," said the luminary, "cannot even see beyond the 4th dimension. We dance through 11 dimensions as easily as you walk across a room. The mathematics of true space travel are beyond your primitive minds." The Thekanari elder leaned forward, and Elena felt the weight of its ancient attention like a mountain, pressing down on her. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your species has grown beyond its flesh prison, we might consider your request again, if you survive that long. The galaxy is full of dangers, added another council member, that require real power to face. Young species that reach too far usually destroy themselves within a few centuries. We have seen it happen many times. Elena looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring down at her. Some looked amused, others bored. A few seemed almost sorry for her. But none looked like they took humanity seriously at all. We understand your position, Elena said finally. But I think you might be surprised by what humans can do when people tell us something is impossible. The prime speaker made a sound like crystal breaking. Determination is admirable in children, but determination without wisdom is just another word for suicide. Your petition is denied, announced the Technari elder. Its words seemed to echo in dimensions Elena couldn't see. Return to your small corner of space. Play with your fusion rockets and chemical weapons. Perhaps your great-great-grandchildren will be ready to stand in this chamber. The council members turned away, their attention already moving to other business. Elena felt dismissed, pushed aside like something unimportant. But as she led her team out of the chamber, she caught something in the data display on her wrist. Communicator. Strange energy readings were coming from the edge of Earth's solar system. Something big was happening out there, something that was making her instruments show impossible numbers. The readings looked like someone was tearing holes in space itself. Elena glanced back at the alien council members, all of them busy with their important galactic business. They probably already knew about the energy readings. They probably thought it was just another sign of human incompetence, some experiment gone wrong. Let them think that, Elena decided. Humans had always done their best work when people underestimated them. As the human delegation left Nexus Prime, their small ship looked tiny next to the massive alien vessels docked around the station. But Elena wasn't thinking about how small their ship was. She was thinking about those energy readings and about the look of absolute certainty on the alien faces. People who were absolutely certain they were right, Elena knew, were usually in for the biggest surprises. The journey back to Earth would take 3 weeks in hyperspace, but Elena had a feeling that by the time they got home everything would be different. The readings from the edge of the solar system were getting stronger every hour. Something was coming. Something big enough to change everything. The aliens thought humans were too primitive to matter. Elena smiled to herself as their ship jumped into hyperspace. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the computer screen until her eyes burned. The numbers made no sense. For 3 days straight, she had been looking at readings from the Deep Space Monitoring Station beyond Pluto, and every hour the impossible became more impossible. Computer, run the calculations again, she said for the 100th time. Calculations complete, the computer replied in its calm voice. The anomaly continues to exist in mathematical spaces that exceed our dimensional models. Current readings suggest the object exists in infinite dimensional states simultaneously. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. She was one of Earth's best scientists, and she had spent 20 years studying space and time. But nothing in her education had prepared her for this. The thing had appeared 3 days ago, just sitting there in empty space like it had always been there. At first, the monitoring computers thought it was just sensor noise, but when they sent a probe to investigate, the readings got worse. The probe had flown right up to the anomaly and sent back data that broke every rule of physics Sarah knew. According to the instruments, the thing was both tiny and huge at the same time. It was spinning in directions that didn't exist. Its mass was infinite and zero and everything in between. Sarah picked up her communication device and called the Emergency Science Council on Earth. Within minutes, faces appeared on her screen from all around the world. She recognized Dr. Martinez from Brazil, Dr. Okafor from Nigeria, and Dr. Petrov from Russia. These were the smartest people on Earth, and they all looked as confused as she felt. The anomaly is growing stronger, Sarah reported. Every probe we send gets the same impossible readings. It's like looking at a math problem that has no answer. Dr. Martinez leaned forward on his screen. Sarah, are you certain the instruments are working correctly? These readings suggest the object exists outside normal space-time completely. I've checked everything twice, Sarah said. The instruments are fine. The problem is that what we're looking at shouldn't be able to exist. Dr. Okafor spoke up from her laboratory in Lagos. What if it's some kind of alien technology? Something beyond our understanding? That's what I'm afraid of, Sarah replied. But if it is alien technology, it's more advanced than anything we've ever imagined. The math doesn't even have words for what this thing is doing. While the scientists talked, Captain Marcus Reed was getting his ship ready for the most dangerous mission of his life. The Prometheus was Earth's most advanced research vessel, built with experimental technology that most people thought was impossible. Reed had volunteered to take his crew closer to the anomaly than any human had gone before. The Prometheus was different from other human ships. Its experimental dimensional scanners could see things that normal instruments missed. The technology was new and dangerous. Some scientists said it was crazy to even try using it, but Reed had always been willing to take risks for the chance to discover something new. Captain, said Navigation Officer Liu from her station on the bridge, we're approaching the outer edge of the anomaly field. The dimensional scanners are starting to pick up something. Reed looked at the main screen. Instead of empty space, he saw patterns of light that twisted and moved in ways that made his eyes hurt. The patterns seemed to go deeper and deeper, like looking down a well that had no bottom. What are you seeing, Liu? Reed asked. Liu stared at her instruments with wide eyes. Captain, this is impossible. The scanners are detecting patterns inside the anomaly. Mathematical patterns. It's like someone built a machine out of pure mathematics. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came through the communication system from the monitoring station. Prometheus, you need to be careful. We don't know what that thing is capable of. Reed studied the swirling patterns on the screen. Something about them looked almost familiar, like a song he had heard before but couldn't quite remember. Liu, can you make sense of those patterns? Liu worked at her station for several minutes, her fingers flying over the controls. Captain, I think the patterns are responding to our presence. When we moved closer, the patterns changed. It's like the anomaly knows we're here. Suddenly, the bridge filled with a sound that wasn't quite a voice. It was like someone speaking in mathematics instead of words, and somehow Reed's mind understood what it was saying. Finally, a species that sees truly. We have waited so long for pupils worthy of our gift. The crew looked around at each other with shocked faces. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Captain, whispered communications. Officer Park, something is talking to us, but our communication systems aren't receiving any signals. Reed felt his heart beating fast. This was first contact with an alien intelligence, but unlike anything humans had ever imagined. This is Captain Reed of the Earthship Prometheus. Who are you? The mathematical voice came again, filling their minds with concepts that were too big for words. We are the architects. We are the first intelligence, the builders of possibility. We exist in the spaces between spaces, in the mathematics that dreams reality into being. Reed tried to understand what he was hearing. You're mathematical beings? We are mathematics. We are the equations that describe how existence works. And you, strange little creatures, are the first species in eons that can hear us truly. Liu looked up from her instruments with excitement in her eyes. Captain, the patterns are becoming more stable. Whatever is speaking to us, it's making the anomaly easier to understand. The voice of the architects filled their minds again. Your species is young, but your minds are not trapped by the rules that limit others. You see patterns where others see chaos. You imagine infinity where others see walls. Reed made a decision that would change human history forever. It was the kind of decision that could save his species or destroy it. But he knew they had to take the chance. Can you teach us? He asked the architects. We can. But first you must have courage. Learning to see infinity requires leaving behind everything you thought you knew about reality. Reed looked around at his crew. They were all staring at him with trust in their eyes. They were ready to follow him anywhere, even into mathematical spaces that didn't exist. "We're ready," Reed said. "Then come inside. Enter the space where mathematics dreams." The anomaly opened before them like a flower made of light and impossible geometry. Reed felt his hands shake as he gave the order that would change everything. "Take us in." The Prometheus moved forward into the heart of the anomaly. As they crossed the boundary, reality became something completely different. The ship seemed to stretch and fold, existing in spaces that had no names. Reed felt his mind expanding, touching thoughts too big for any human brain. Outside the ship, if outside had any meaning anymore, mathematical beings waited to teach humanity how to think. In infinite dimensions, the real adventure was just beginning. Inside the anomaly, the Prometheus floated in a space that shouldn't exist. Captain Reed looked out the main window and saw mathematics made visible. Equations danced in the air like living creatures. Numbers grew into trees of light. Geometric shapes folded through themselves in endless patterns. "Captain," said Lou, her voice full of wonder, "our instruments don't know how to measure this place. According to the scanners, we're everywhere and nowhere at the same time." Reed nodded, still trying to understand what he was seeing. The laws of physics that had ruled his entire life seemed like suggestions here. Distance meant nothing. Time moved in circles. Up and down were the same direction. The voice of the architects filled their minds again, but now Reed could see them too. They weren't creatures in any normal sense. They were living mathematics, thoughts that had learned to think themselves, equations that had become conscious. They moved through spaces that normal minds couldn't imagine, dancing between dimensions that existed only as ideas. "Welcome, young builders," said the largest architect. Its presence felt like standing next to a star made of pure knowledge. "We are the first intelligence in this universe. We evolved beyond physical form before your son was born." Another architect, shaped like a spiral of golden numbers, spoke next. "We have watched species rise and fall for billions of years. Most become trapped by their own success. They learn to travel between stars and think they have mastered the universe." Reed found his voice. "But we haven't mastered anything. The Galactic Council just told us we're too primitive to matter." The architects made a sound like laughter, but it was laughter made of mathematics. "The Council species think 11 dimensions is the limit of reality. They stopped learning when they reached that point. They became prisoners of their own certainty." Third architect, looking like a storm made of living geometry, moved closer to the ship. "But your species is different. You refuse to accept limits. When someone tells you something is impossible, you find a way to do it anyway." Dr. Park, the ship's communications officer, spoke up. "How do you know so much about humans?" "We have been watching you for centuries," replied the golden spiral architect. "When you first looked up at the stars, we saw potential. When you split the atom, we saw curiosity. When you built your first spaceships, we saw courage." The largest architect's presence filled the bridge with warmth. "Most species explore space to find resources or territory. You explore space because you want to know what's out there. That curiosity makes you special." Reed felt his mind expanding as the architect spoke. Ideas that had never occurred to him before started making sense. "You want to teach us something." "We want to teach you everything," said the storm-shaped architect. "But first, you must understand that dimensions are not barriers. They are tools. Reality is not a prison. It is a canvas." The teaching began in ways that human language couldn't describe. The architects didn't just tell the crew about infinite dimensional mathematics. They made them experience it. Reed felt his consciousness stretch across spaces that didn't have names. He saw through mathematical eyes that could perceive patterns in reality itself. Lou gasped as numbers and equations filled her mind, but instead of being confusing, they made perfect sense. She could see how space and time were just different ways of looking at the same thing. She understood that matter and energy were dance partners in a cosmic ballet. "The Council species learned to use dimensions," explained the Golden Architect. "You will learn to become dimensions, You will think in mathematical spaces that exist only as pure possibility. Hours passed, or maybe years, or maybe no time at all. Inside the infinite dimension, normal time didn't work the same way. The crew of the Prometheus learned things that would have taken other species millennia to understand. Reed watched his ship change around him. The metal hull began to flow like liquid, but liquid made of solid mathematics. New systems grew from the walls, not machines but living equations that could manipulate reality directly. The fusion reactor disappeared, replaced by something that drew power from the mathematical concept of infinity itself. Your ship is becoming a tool for infinite dimensional travel, explained the storm architect. It will exist in as many dimensions as you need. It will move not by traveling through space, but by choosing to be in different places. Navigation Officer Liu understood first. We won't have to fly to other planets. We'll just decide we're already there. Exactly, said the Golden Architect. Distance is just an opinion. Time is just a suggestion. Physical laws are just habits the universe has gotten into. Dr. Park discovered she could communicate across dimensions that didn't exist, sending messages through mathematical spaces that connected all points in reality. Engineer Thompson found he could repair systems by thinking them into better configurations. But the most amazing discovery was what happened to their weapons. The Prometheus had started its journey with simple human military technology, missiles, and energy beams that the Council species had mocked. Now, weapon systems emerged from the ship's hull that could strike targets by moving through dimensions the enemy couldn't see. Your weapons will not destroy, taught the largest architect. They will convince matter to reorganize itself. They will suggest to energy that it would prefer to be somewhere else. Reed began to understand the true scope of what they were learning. We're not just getting better technology. We're learning to think differently about reality itself. Yes, said all the architects together, their mathematical voices creating harmonies that made space itself sing. Other species tried to conquer the universe. You will learn to cooperate with it. The storm architect moved closer, and Reed felt ancient wisdom touching his mind. The universe is not your enemy to be defeated. It is your partner in an infinite dance of possibility. Learn to dance with reality, and reality will dance with you. As the teaching continued, the crew realized they were becoming something new, not just humans with better technology, but humans who thought in ways that no other species could imagine. They were learning to see the universe as it really was, not a collection of objects separated by empty space, but a living symphony of mathematical relationships. We are ready to return, Reed said finally, ready to show the galaxy what humans can really do. The architect's presence filled with something like pride. Go, young dancers. Show the universe that there are always new steps to learn, new music to hear, new possibilities to explore. The Prometheus began to move, but not through space. Instead, it stepped sideways through dimensions that existed only in mathematical theory, traveling by the simple method of deciding to be somewhere else. The crew was no longer quite human in the old sense. They were something new, something that thought in infinite dimensions and saw reality as an endless field of possibility. The Galactic Council was about to get the surprise of their very long lives. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council rejected humanity's petition. On Nexus Prime, the Great Crystal Station floated peacefully between the stars. The alien council members went about their important business, making decisions for thousands of worlds and billions of beings. The Vectar Prime speaker stood in its private chamber, watching the stars through walls of living crystal. Its geometric form pulsed with satisfaction. The universe was ordered and predictable. Young species knew their place. The mathematics of power were clear and simple. That peaceful moment ended when every alarm on Nexus Prime began screaming at once. In the station's control center, technicians from a dozen different species stared at their instruments in shock. The hive mind controllers, beings that shared thoughts across their entire species, buzzed with panic. The quantum fish, creatures that existed as swimming probabilities, flickered in and out of reality with fear. Something is coming, announced the chief controller, a Vectar whose crystal body had turned dark with worry. Long-range sensors detect an approaching vessel, but the readings make no sense. Defense Commander Zenth, a being made of living metal, studied the displays with growing alarm. The ship appears to exist in dimensions our sensors cannot properly measure. It's moving through space-time in ways that violate known physics. The Prime Speaker arrived in the control center with swift, chiming steps. "Show me," it commanded. The main display filled with an image that hurt to look at directly. The Prometheus appeared on screen, but it looked nothing like the simple human ship that had visited 3 months before. Its hull rippled with geometric patterns that seemed to fold through spaces that shouldn't exist. The surface of the ship moved like liquid metal, but liquid that flowed in mathematical directions that had no names. "This is impossible," whispered the Tecnari elder, its ancient voice shaking for the first time in centuries. "No species advances this quickly. It took my people 10,000 years to master the 11th dimension." The ship moved closer to Nexus Prime, and the station's defensive systems automatically activated. Barriers of pure energy snapped into place around the station, walls of 11th dimensional force that could stop anything in the known galaxy. The barriers didn't even slow the human ship down. The Prometheus approached the energy walls and simply stepped around them. Not through them, not over them, but around them through mathematical spaces that the builders of the barriers had never imagined. The ship moved like someone walking around a puddle, treating the Council's ultimate defensive technology like a minor inconvenience. "Our shields are useless," reported Defense Commander Zenth, his metallic voice hollow with disbelief. "The human vessel is moving through dimensional spaces our barriers cannot reach." The Prime Speaker's crystal form flickered with what might have been fear. "Target the ship with our primary weapons." Weapon systems across Nexus Prime turned toward the approaching Prometheus. Energy cannons that could destroy entire moons charged to full power. Reality-warping missiles that could turn space itself inside out locked onto their target. But when they fired, there was nothing to hit. The Prometheus existed in too many dimensions at once for the weapons to find a solid target. The missiles passed through spaces where the ship had been moments before, but the ship was also somewhere else entirely. The energy beams struck mathematical echoes of the vessel, while the real ship danced through dimensions that the weapons couldn't reach. "Communications incoming," announced the station's communication officer, her tentacles twitching with nervousness. Commander Elena Vasquez's voice filled the control center, but now it carried harmonics that made the air itself shimmer. Her words seemed to come from multiple directions at once, as if she was speaking from several dimensions simultaneously. "Nexus Prime Control. This is the Earth vessel Prometheus requesting permission to dock. I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss." The control center fell silent. Every being present stared at the impossible ship on their screens. The humans hadn't just improved their technology, they had transcended it entirely. The Luminari Prime, beings of pure energy who had always thought themselves superior to flesh-based life, flickered with uncertainty. How is this possible? They were primitives, flesh-bound creatures who could barely see beyond 3 dimensions. "Something has changed them," said the quantum fish representative, its probability-based form shifting through dozens of possible configurations. "They are no longer the same species we met 3 months ago." Defense Commander Zenth tried one more desperate measure. "All ships converge on the human vessel. Surround it from every possible angle." The Council's fleet moved to encircle the Prometheus. Hundreds of advanced warships, each one capable of destroying planets, formed a perfect sphere around the human vessel. Surely, even with its strange new abilities, one small ship couldn't escape such overwhelming force. The Prometheus responded by existing in the spaces between the encircling ships. The human vessel didn't fight the blockade, it ignored it completely. The ship moved through mathematical dimensions that placed it simultaneously inside and outside the sphere of Council ships. It was surrounded and free at the same time, trapped and escaped in the same moment. "This violates everything we know about space and time," said the Tecnari elder, its ancient mind struggling to process what it was seeing. Matter cannot exist in contradictory states simultaneously. Unless, said a small voice from the back of the control center, unless they have learned to think beyond our understanding of contradictions. The speaker was a young Vectar technician, barely past the crystal-forming age. The older council members turned to stare at her with shock. Junior technicians didn't speak up during crisis meetings. Explain yourself, commanded the prime speaker. The young technician's form glowed brighter with nervousness, but she continued. What if the humans have learned to treat our laws of physics as suggestions instead of absolute rules? What if they've found teachers who think in mathematical spaces we can't imagine? The control center filled with uncomfortable silence. The idea was terrifying because it meant that everything the council believed about reality might be incomplete. Commander Vasquez's voice came through the communication system again, and now everyone could hear the power behind her words. We're not here to fight you. We're here to talk. Will you grant us an audience, or do we need to demonstrate more of what we've learned? The prime speaker looked around at its fellow council members. The Luminari were dimming with fear. The Tecnari elder's ancient form trembled. The quantum fish flickered through probability states of panic. Grant them docking permission, the prime speaker said finally. But maintain full alert status. The Prometheus approached the docking bay, moving through space in ways that made the station's computers give up trying to calculate its trajectory. The ship existed where it chose to exist, when it chose to exist there. As the docking clamps engaged, every being on Nexus Prime felt a change in the air itself. Reality seemed more flexible somehow, as if the presence of the humans was making the universe remember that it had more possibilities than anyone had imagined. In the docking bay, the airlock of the Prometheus opened. 3 figures stepped out, and even though they looked human, everything about them had changed. They moved with the confidence of beings who understood that reality was their partner, not their master. The Galactic Council was about to learn what it meant when humans decided that impossible was just another word for interesting. The great council chambers of Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. The massive circular room designed to hold the representatives of 12 advanced species felt smaller somehow with just 3 humans standing at its center. Captain Reed, Commander, Vasquez and Dr. Chen didn't tower over the alien beings around them. Physically, they were still small compared to the crystal giants of the Vectar or the ancient bulk of the Tecnari, but their presence seemed to fill spaces that normal beings couldn't see. When they moved, the air itself shimmered with mathematical possibilities. The alien council members huddled in their designated areas like children afraid of the dark. The Luminari, who had always danced as pure energy, now flickered nervously. Their light seemed dim and uncertain next to the quiet power radiating from the humans. Commander Vasquez stepped forward, and space bent slightly around her. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made reality itself pay attention. 3 months ago, you asked us to return when we had mastered dimensional science. We've done better than that. We've learned to think beyond dimensions entirely. The Vectar Prime speaker tried to maintain its dignity, but its crystal form kept flickering between different geometric configurations. What you display is impressive, but surely you cannot claim to have surpassed civilizations that are millions of years old. Dr. Chen smiled, and for a moment the council glimpsed infinite spaces dancing behind her eyes. Age doesn't matter when you're thinking in the wrong direction. You've spent millions of years learning to control dimensions. We spent 3 months learning to cooperate with them. She gestured, and mathematical equations appeared in the air around her. But these weren't normal equations. They were alive, growing and changing like flowers made of pure thought. The alien representatives stared in amazement as the formulas rewrote themselves into new configurations of possibility. Your species reached the 11th dimension and stopped, Captain Reed said, his voice carrying undertones that made the walls of the chamber resonate with harmony. You thought you'd found the limit of reality, but infinity has no limits. The Tecnari elder, whose mind had pondered the mysteries of existence for tens of thousands of years, leaned forward with something like desperation in its ancient voice. But the mathematics, the fundamental laws of physics. They cannot simply be ignored. We're not ignoring them, Dr. Chen replied gently. We're dancing with them. The architects taught us that the universe isn't a machine to be operated. It's a partner to be collaborated with. A shocked silence filled the chamber. The Luminary Prime's energy form flickered wildly. The architects, they are legend. Myth. No one has seen them since the first age of the galaxy. They were waiting, Commander Vasquez explained, for a species stubborn enough to keep asking, what's next, instead of, what's the limit? They were waiting for people who would refuse to accept that something couldn't be done. Through the transparent walls of the chamber, the council members could see more human ships arriving. But these weren't ships in any normal sense. They moved through space like thoughts moving through a mind, appearing wherever their crews decided they should be. Some existed in 17 dimensions at once, while their crews had lunch in what looked like ordinary three-dimensional space. The quantum fish representative, a being that existed as swimming probability, spoke in a voice like static electricity. How many of you have been changed? All of humanity, Captain Reed answered simply. The architect's gift isn't limited by distance or time. Every human in the galaxy now thinks in infinite dimensional mathematics. Your children are learning to see patterns you can't imagine. The implications hit the council like a wave of cold water. If all humans could now manipulate reality at its most fundamental level, then the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely. The Vectar Prime speaker's form darkened with what might have been anger or fear. You come here to gloat? To show us how powerless we have become? Commander Vasquez shook her head and her expression was surprisingly gentle. We came here to invite you to learn with us. The universe is much bigger than any of us realized. There's room for everyone to grow. But first, Dr. Chen added, you have to let go of the idea that you've already learned everything important. You have to become curious again. A young Vectar technician near the back of the chamber suddenly stood up. Her crystal form glowed bright with excitement. I want to learn. I want to see what they see. The older council members turned to stare at her in shock. But before anyone could stop her, she stepped forward toward the humans. Dr. Chen smiled and extended her hand. When the young Vectar touched it, her crystal body began to pulse with new patterns of light. Mathematical concepts flowed between them, and suddenly the young alien was seeing through eyes that could perceive infinite dimensions. Oh, the young Vectar whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Oh, it's beautiful. Reality is so much bigger than I thought. There are colors that don't exist yet. There are spaces between the spaces I knew about. More young aliens began standing up around the chamber. A juvenile luminari flickered forward, followed by an adolescent technari whose metal skin was bright, with curiosity. The older council members watched in amazement as their youth began learning to think in ways that transcended everything they had been taught. This is how change happens, Captain Reed said to the remaining council members. Not through force or conquest, but through curiosity and the courage to admit you might not know everything. The Technari elder watched its young apprentice learning to manipulate reality with mathematical thought, and something like wonder filled its ancient voice. We became so certain we were wise that we stopped learning to be wise. Wisdom isn't about having all the answers, Commander Vasquez replied. It's about having the courage to keep asking new questions. The formal session dissolved into something that had never happened in council history. A teaching moment. The humans didn't claim authority or demand submission. Instead, they sat with anyone who wanted to learn, sharing the gift the architects had given them. Some of the older aliens were too set in their ways to change. They left the chamber muttering about the collapse of order and the chaos of letting primitives teach their elders. But many stayed, especially the young ones, eager to discover what lay beyond the dimensional barriers they had always accepted as absolute. As the hours passed, more human ships arrived in the system. But they weren't bringing conquest fleets or occupation forces. They carried explorers and teachers, scientists and artists, all of them eager to share the infinite possibilities they had discovered. The Prometheus remained docked at Nexus Prime, its hull rippling with mathematical patterns that had become more beautiful as more beings learned to see them properly. The ship existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, but now it wasn't alone. Several alien vessels were learning to exist in multiple dimensions as well, their crews guided by human teachers who remembered what it was like to see infinity for the first time. Commander Vasquez stood at the great window of the council chamber looking out at stars that seemed brighter somehow. Captain Reed joined her, followed by Dr. Chen and a growing group of beings from a dozen different species. "What happens now?" asked the young Vectar technician, her crystal form still glowing with new understanding. "Now we explore," Dr. Chen said simply. "The universe is infinite and we've only just learned to see the first glimpse of what's possible." Captain Reed nodded toward the stars. "There are galaxies out there that think in ways we haven't imagined yet. There are forms of existence that don't even use matter and energy the way we do. The architects showed us the beginning of infinity, but the rest is up to us." The group fell silent, all of them contemplating the vastness of what lay ahead. The distance, more ships were arriving from Earth and from alien worlds. Not warships, but exploration vessels crewed by beings who had learned to think beyond the boundaries that had once defined their species. The age of limitations was ending. The age of infinite possibility was just beginning, and at the heart of it all, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't technology or weapons or even wisdom. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The universe, it turned out, had been waiting for that gift for a very long time.